So we really are used to thinking of peace as something that happens, in policy, uh, between nations. But the roots of you either accept violence in the home, family violence, or whether you really think it's an abnormal event to use violence to control others, to fight others. Uh, that starts in the home. Welcome to the Power of Partnership podcast. I'm Riane Eisler, President of the Center for Partnership Systems. This podcast brings you voices from the partnership movement, people using partnership practices to build a world that values caring, nature, and shared prosperity. The Power of Partnership podcast is hosted by Cherri Jacobs Pruitt, a health policy and partnership scholar. And now on to today's POP podcast episode.
Welcome to this special episode of the Power of Partnership podcast. I'm your host, Cherri Jacobs Pruitt, and today we're turning our spotlight to a global transformative event that's happening October 29th, 2025, the Peace Begins at Home Summit. In a time of growing division and disconnection, this one-day global gathering brings together global leaders and change makers to explore a vital truth. Peace doesn't begin with policymakers or leaders in distant lands. It begins in our homes, where we first learn about love, power, and connection. To create a more peaceful world, we must begin with the relationships and systems closest to us. Rooted in Dr. Riane Eisler's groundbreaking work on cultural transformation, the summit challenges the belief that violence and inequality are simply human nature. Instead, it shows how the structures we grow up in, whether shaped by domination or partnership, deeply influence the kind of world we co-create. By moving away from systems that normalize control and violence and towards those that value care, equity, and mutual respect, we can transform not only our homes, but our cultures and our future. Here to tell us more are two incredible women shaping this event. Dr. Riane Eisler, best-selling author, social systems scientist, and the visionary whose work inspired the summit, and Gina Miltiadou, director of the summit. Welcome to you both.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Cherri. We can't wait to tell you more about the summit.
So, Riane, let's start with you. Your groundbreaking work has helped so many of us reimagine what peace really means. For those of our audience members who may be new to your work, what do you mean when you say peace begins at home?
Because very simply, neuroscience shows that, especially during our first 5 years, which of course take place mainly in families, what we experience, what we observe, actually shapes nothing less than our brains, than how we think, how we feel, how we act. And this happens really before our critical faculties are fully formed. So we really are used to thinking of peace as something that happens, in policy between nations. But the roots of you either accept violence in the home, family violence, or whether you really think it's an abnormal event to use violence to control others, to fight others. That starts in the home. And my research over, what is it now, 4 or 5 decades, shows that what the United Nations has said, that most children worldwide, unfortunately, grow up in unsafe homes. So homes where violence is used as a form of discipline. There are many interconnections with gender, with cornerstones of what I call either domination or partnership systems, with economics, with authoritarianism, with story and language. So we have to take a systems approach and connect the dots.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. So Gina, now let's have you speak a little bit about how the summit idea got started. What was the spark that led to the Peace Begins at Home Summit?
So it actually started in the most unexpected way. I first met Riane at a virtual webinar where she was the keynote speaker. And after her talk, by a beautiful accident, she landed in the same small breakout room as me. And we started talking and something just clicked. She later then invited me to help her think through a project that she was working on. And that evolved into joining her board. Then, toward the end of last year, she posed a challenge to a small group of us. And the challenge was this: how can we make visible or connect the dots between the link between violence in the home and violence in the world? And that's when the idea of the summit really started to take shape. And the timing couldn't be feel more urgent. Around the world, we are seeing so much polarization, so much division, rising authoritarianism, so much harm on both a personal and political level. And Riane felt this deep and urgent need to help people connect the dots. Because if we want lasting peace, we can't just look outward at war or global conflict. We have to start at the root, which is the home. Because what happens in our homes, as Riane has said, how we value care, how we resolve conflict, how we treat one another, that becomes the blueprint of every single system that we live in, from the relationships that we have, to the businesses we run, to education, to politics, to media, even how we relate to nature. So if we can begin to shift those early patterns from domination toward partnership, we can begin to change the larger systems too. And that's what makes the summit so powerful. It's about connecting peace building to caregiving, to healing, and systemic change at every level of life.
So exciting. Yeah, the statistics are really, really staggering. According to UNICEF, 1.6 billion children around the world, that's 2 out of every children, regularly experience, as you mentioned earlier, Riane, violence by caregivers in their homes. And of course, as we all know, these aren't just numbers. They're children whose most intimate environments, the places meant to nurture them, are instead sources of harm. And yet, when we talk about violence, this reality is too often overlooked.
Well, the statistics that you've mentioned are devastating, and yet they're actually rarely part of the conversation when we talk about peace. Too often we treat peace as something that's negotiated at policy tables or measured as the absence of war. But if we want lasting peace, we have to look at where the patterns of harm actually begin, and that's the home. Because what happens in the home is sets the earliest blueprint of how we navigate the world. And if a child grows up in an environment where control, fear, and violence are normalized, those patterns don't just disappear when they grow up and become adults. They show up in the institutions that they build, the leaders they follow, the votes they cast, the policies they support, and the way that they treat each other. So what makes the summit so different is that we're not just looking at the symptoms, the wars, the systemic injustices, the polarization that we see all around us. We're going to the root. We're connecting those dots between the harm or care that we experience in our homes and the wider systems that we live in. And just as importantly, we're showing that those patterns can actually be changed. It's not a hopeless situation. This summit is about replacing domination with partnership at every level of life. And that's why we're bringing together such a diverse group of voices. So we have peace builders, educators, policymakers, survivors, scientists, because if we can shift the way that we relate to each other, then we can shift the systems that actually shape our cultures and our future.
Beautiful. So, Riane, let's dig a little bit deeper. You've long emphasized the role of early childhood, the value we place on caregiving, and the impact of gender dynamics in shaping societal outcomes. How will all of those ideas show up in the summit?
Well, they will show up through the variety of speakers from all over the world, because we're not only talking about a national phenomenon. You saw the statistics, they're global. So in discussions of childhood trauma, of course, we are talking about the neuroscience of care in our earliest years, and care as a public issue and not a women's issue. And this is very important because care has been devalued as, quote, feminine, right? Both our economic systems unfortunately reflect this, and this will be part of the summit. For example, both Smith, the, quote, father of capitalism, and Marx, quote, the father of socialism, saw caring for people as just reproductive work rather than productive work. And this is replicated in our GDP and GNP. According to the norms in their time, this work was to be done for free by a woman in a male-controlled household. And as I said, GDP perpetuates this. It does not include the work of caring, and neither is that work rewarded by our economic system unless it's in the market. So a parent may work from dawn to dusk, but it is not part of GDP. And as for caring for nature, there is absolutely nothing in what they wrote in their voluminous writings about capitalism and socialism about caring for nature. For them, caring for nature just was non-existent. Nature was there to be exploited. And again, GDP, and this will come out in the summit, GDP reflects this. So that a tree, which we depend upon naturally for breathing, right, for oxygen, it's not part of GDP until it is dead, until it is a log. Now, this absolutely is reality stood on its head. And the aim of the summit is to help us stand reality right side up.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about what people can expect to experience during the summit. Gina, how about you? Can you speak a little bit more about the speakers and the types of experiences and connections people who attend can expect to experience?
Yeah, of course. We have been very intentional in how we've built the agenda because these issues touch every part of life. So far, we have 22 speakers from 13 different countries, and we're not done yet. We want people to hear perspectives from every corner of the world. And of course, Riane will be doing the opening keynote, as it is her work that is the inspiration behind the summit. But we're also honored to feature incredible leaders like Scarlett Lewis, who is the founder of the Choose Love movement after the loss of her son Jesse in the Sandy Hook tragedy. Zainab Selby, the global humanitarian and founder of Women for Women International. Dr. Richard Davidson, one of the world's leading neuroscientists on the science and compassion of trauma and healing. We'll also hear from extraordinary cultural and spiritual voices like Lila June, an Indigenous musician, scholar, and activist. Ella Gandhi, a human rights advocate and granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. And Satish Kumar, the globally respected peace activist and former Jain monk. We're also really excited about amplifying youth leaders like Mercelina Amin from Afghanistan and Joseph Akilimali from the Democratic Republic of Congo, both whose courage and clarity at such a young age have been truly inspiring. So you can see that, and that's just to mention a few of them. So you can see that it is a deeply diverse and intergenerational group: survivors, scientists, policymakers, educators, and community leaders, all working in different ways to interrupt cycles of harm and build cultures of care. And the production is actually going to match the level of thoughtfulness. So we're partnering with Hubcast Media to broadcast the summit globally. And our MC will be live in their studios in Vancouver. And then we'll be patching in speakers and, of course, people who register to join us from all over the world. So this is not going to feel like a string of Zoom calls. It's a broadcast quality event designed to be dynamic, engaging, and truly international.
You are listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. We hope you are enjoying today's episode and you will consider joining our family of sponsors. Or you can help us attract sponsors by downloading, following, or subscribing to the series and liking and rating each episode you view on YouTube. We also would love to hear from you, including if you have a partnership story that you would like to share. Reach out to us at center@partnershipway.org. And now, back to today's episode. And it really sounds like it's a movement, not just an event or a summit. I understand there's also going to be a handbook that's going to be made available. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. So this is more than just a one-day event. We knew from the beginning that if we wanted the summit to create real impact, that we needed to leave people with something that they could carry forward, something tangible. We've all been to amazing events where we feel so inspired on the day, but then you walk out and you're just like, okay, so now what? And so that's where the Peace Begins at Home post-summit handbook comes in. So it'll capture the most important insights, strategies, and tools that are shared on the day from the summit, from how we build healthier family systems to how we shift institutions and cultures from domination to partnership. And it's not going to be something that just sits on a shelf. We're designing it as a practical toolkit, an accessible resource that anybody can use, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a policymaker, a community leader, or someone who just wants to play a part in building a more peaceful world. And so the idea is that long after the 29th of October, that this ripple effect will continue. So this handbook will really help people take what they've learned from the summit and put it into action in their homes, their workplaces, their communities, anywhere where they have influence.
So, Riane, as the inspiration behind this summit, what are you most excited about when you think about the summit and its potential legacy?
Well, I'm excited about everything in the summit. You know, it's long been one of my dreams that my legacy would last after I'm no longer here. And this summit is part of that legacy. Uh, it is part of really cultural transformation, because that's what we're talking about, isn't it? We know that the present system, and I'm really going to go now into somewhat the larger picture, it is not sustainable. Um, it is incapable of meeting the challenges and their existential challenges that we face. Uh, Climate change slowly doing us in, nuclear weapons. We now have the power to really destroy uh, our species, don't we? With a weapon, not to speak of an interconnected world, not only by technologies of transportation, but by technologies of communication, and yes, as I said, technologies of destruction. So cultural transformation isn't just a phrase. Uh, it is a needed fact. And more people are becoming aware of this, but they've lacked the vocabulary, the terms for what we need to leave behind and what we need to help create. And the struggle for our future, and it is a struggle, is not between just right, left, religious, secular, Eastern, Western, Northern, Southern, uh, capitalist, socialist. These are, as I mentioned, are really distractions from the underlying problem, which is our domination heritage. And this heritage is being challenged, frankly, by this conference, but it is not about shame or blame. We've all inherited spanking as a form of discipline, or worse, whipping, uh, uh, all kinds of violence against children. And we are learning now from neuroscience that that leaves a mark in how we think, how we feel, how we act, including how we vote. Uh, and yes, whether we accept war and terrorism and crime as just the way things are, or they become really rarities, aberrations. So we're talking about a conference that is designed to help us see, as Gina put it, and as you put it, Cherri, not just symptoms, but underlying causes. This summit goes very deep, and it gives us grounded hope for the future that we can change, because we can change. We have very flexible brains, as I'm sure that our neuroscientists on the panel and many others will show with concrete examples.
Lovely. Gina, how about, as you've been planning this summit, what has been the most meaningful, or some of the most meaningful experiences you've had?
There have been so many meaningful moments. I've loved speaking with all of the speakers and learning more about their stories. But the one conversation that has really kind of stuck in my mind is the one that I had with Scarlett Lewis, who tragically lost her little son, Jesse, in the Sandy Hook school shooting. Scarlett shared that she has gone into prisons and actually spoken to shooters, and she asks them one powerful question, and that is, how have we failed you? Now, as a mother, I was profoundly moved by that, because despite her unimaginable heartbreak and loss, she understood that these tragedies don't happen in a vacuum, that it's actually the systems around us that can either nurture or fail us. And those failures ripple outwards. And that's exactly what the summit is about. Not just blaming individuals, but looking at how those patterns that we create in homes, in communities, in institutions can perpetuate cycles of harm, or build cultures of care. And so Scarlett really embodies that clarity and that courage. And I found that so inspiring. It'll stick with me for the rest of my life, that story.
Wow.
Mm.
So the summit is global, virtual, and open to all. So how can people participate or get involved?
Absolutely. So the easiest way is to go to our website and to register at the peacebeginsathome.summit.org. And we have an early bird ticket available until the 31st of August for $35. And after that, the price goes up to $47. There's also a special supporter ticket option for $79. And when you purchase that ticket, part of your fee, part of your ticket will go towards supporting somebody who can't afford to come. Because we really believe that everybody deserves a seat at the table for this conversation, this important conversation. So the summit will take place on October 29th from 1300 to 1930 UTC. So that's from 1 o'clock to 7:30 UTC. But if that time zone doesn't work for people, don't worry. Every ticket includes 30-day access to the replay, so you can watch the sessions at a time that works best for you. So, and you asked who the summit is for. It is for anybody who cares about building a more peaceful and just world. Caregivers, parents, educators, policymakers, peace builders, community leaders, systems thinkers, and anybody who simply wants to be part of the solution. And because it's virtual and global, you can join from wherever you are. All you need is the willingness to show up and an open heart and a desire to want to create change.
Beautiful. I am so looking forward to it. Before we close, are there any final words that you would each like to share with our audience? And Riane, I'm going to ask you to go first.
Well, thank you. And thank you for doing this program, which is so important to let people know. Look, really at what we're talking about is a call to reimagine peace, that it's not just the absence of war, a period between wars, if you will, which is all it can be in domination systems, because, as I said, they're really based on fear, on violence, starting in families, but really to think of the positives, the presence of care, and leaving behind in-group versus out-group thinking and acting. That's what peace is about. And I do want to mention one thing. This is not about blaming anyone. I'm emphasizing this. And it certainly isn't about blaming men who, as you know, the statistics are very clear, but it has to do with male socialization. And we have two speakers, by the way, Gary Barker and Jackson Katz, both of whom are working with men to change the equation of real masculinity with violence. And I want to close really with a personal story. One day I was in a park and I heard a child wailing. And then I heard a man's voice. And what the man was saying was, "And I will hit you until you stop crying." Boys don't cry. Men don't cry. And we are failing in our socialization, not only the learned helplessness of women and this whole in-group versus out-group thinking that starts with the ranking of the female form under the male form and its equation of difference, really, with dominating and being dominated, with superiority and inferiority, with being served and serving. So this summit is very unusual because it helps us do what we can do so well: systems thinking, connecting the dots, and doing something to make our world a safer place for us all.
Beautiful. Gina, I know that's hard to top, but how about you? What fun.
I'll try, I'll add to it. Yeah, I suppose the last thing I'd say is that I think it's really important to remember that peace is not abstract. It's not something that happens out there in distant places. It is built in the choices that we make every day, in the way that we treat each other and the values that we pass on. And this summit, for me, is about reminding ourselves that we all have a role to play, no matter who we are or where we live. And my hope is that people will just come away not only with insight, but also with a renewed sense of possibility, that together we can shift the patterns that we've inherited and create something better for ourselves and for the next generation.
Beautiful. So to our listeners, just in closing, if you care about peace, you belong at this summit. So as Gina said, you can register at www.peacebeginsathomesummit.org. Or if you'd like to get involved, send us a message at that same website on the Contact Us link. Again, we hope to see you at the Peace Begins at Home Summit happening October 29th, 2025 from 1300 to 1930 UTC or Coordinated Universal Time. Let's reimagine peace from the inside out and take one more step toward building a world that values care, nature, and shared prosperity. Until next time, I'm Cherri Jacobs Pruitt, and this has been a special episode of the Power of Partnership podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Partnership podcast. We're grateful to Rising Appalachia for the use of resilience as our Power of Partnership theme music. If you would like us to feature your partnership story, or if you would like to be a proud sponsor of the Power of Partnership podcast, please contact us at center@partnershipway.org. We hope you enjoyed this episode and will leave us a review on your favorite podcast channel. And don't forget to subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released. I'm Cherri Jacobs Pruitt. See you next time on the Power of Partnership podcast.
I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos. Uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to live.